back to another powerful episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host Avik, and today's episode is going to be a raw, real, and wide open. So, dear listeners, my guest today is Donald Dunn. So, welcome to the show, Donald.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, before we delve deep into the discussion, I'll quickly love to introduce you with Donald. So, Donald is a decorated US Army veteran who spent over 20 years in service, including 68 months in the combat zones across Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. But his story doesn't stop at the battlefield. So he has walked through the loss, trauma, and even moments of wishing for the death. And yet, out of that darkness, he's become a voice, building veteran voice radio, launching Spirits and Stories, and also writing books like Echoes of War and the upcoming When Demons Followed Me Home. So, what makes today special is that he isn't here with a script, he's here with a mission. He is an open book and ready to talk about his time in the military, personal trauma, non-profit work, and anything in between. So, that's where the magic happens, right? So, let's lean in together for a conversation that's going to change, challenge, move, and inspire. So, welcome to the show again, Donald.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Amazing. So, Donald, you have lived through the intensity of combat and the obviously the silence that follows after the uniform comes off. So, um, looking back, what was the harder? I mean, the battlefield or coming home?
To be honest, you know,
Yeah.
I think it was the coming home. Um, at first, until you actually experience uh, something negative, uh, obviously being shot at and mortars and stuff like that is scary. But until you see the reality of what could happen, and for me, that happened 3 years out into the deployments. So that happened 2005, June 28th, when several of my friends were killed, and that's when seeing the reality of what happens changed it from just a job to this is serious. Something really bad could happen, and leave my family stranded and everything else. And I think that's kind of the moment where things started going downhill.
Exactly, exactly. So, like, I mean, what was the moment when you realized that the real war had only just begun after the army?
So I didn't realize how bad off I was. Um, it started out more so as just not liking myself. And I think back now that this was just a time of myself changing, things that I have seen, scars, that have calloused over and changed me as a person. Um, my inner self did not like who I had became, and it showed every day in my head. I didn't like the things I did. I didn't feel like I lived up to being a father. I didn't feel like I was a good husband anymore. And I just did not feel like I fit in. And so when I left the military, um, thinking that's what I wanted, know now that I was already in severe depression before I even left. But once I left, I decided to open up my own trucking company, and I isolated myself in a semi truck for 6 weeks at a time, and I'd come home for a week and then back out on the road. And it slowly got to the point where I felt more comfortable isolated in that little truck than I did even being on the couch with my family. And it all came to a breaking point when me and my son got into a fight the day after a hurricane just came in, and I ended up throwing him out of the house. And at that moment, I realized that I had became a very bad person, to put it mildly. I knew I needed help at that point, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. And that's when I first went and seen a psychologist.
Exactly. I can totally understand this. Yeah, definitely. Like, um, and that really reframes that what most of us assume. It reminds us that sometimes the battles nobody sees are the hardest ones to survive. So that's true, definitely. And so your first book, like Echoes of War,
Yeah.
is brutally honest about the PTSD and the survivor's guilt. So how did writing it like help you process your own pain?
So to be honest, I put
Mm.
when I first started that book, it wasn't meant to be a book. Um, After getting some help and some time to gather my thoughts, I realized that the whole time the problem was that I was mad at something that I created. You know, 68 months worth of deployments, my wife became to the point where me going away was just the job. There was no longer any threats, nobody's gonna get killed, everything's fine. Life is great. See you in a year. And the first time I left, she was crying, and the last time I left, she rolled over, gave me a kiss, and said, "See you in a year." And that's how numb she came to it. And that is my fault because I never talked to her about the trauma that was going on, my feelings, things that had happened, things that I had seen. And I expected her to understand something that I had never explained to her because I always said everything's fine. I would wake up screaming and she would ask me what's wrong. I just tell her a bad dream. And she'd say, "Well, what was it?" And I said, "I don't remember," which, was obviously a lie. But I decided to write that as a document to give to my wife and kids so that they would understand without having to have a conversation and answer a bunch of questions. I just wanted the ability to get the information out and let them use it however they wanted. My daughter was the one that, after reading it, asked me to. She thought I should publish it. So that's how it became a book.
Exactly. Exactly. So, like, uh, I mean, uh, and with if I have to say, like, with the demons followed me home.
Mhm.
You take trauma into kind of almost a supernatural realm. So why
Mm.
you choose to blur the line? Uh, I mean, when I say line, it means the reality and the metaphor.
So the big problem with
Mm.
the trauma and PTSD, and I'm not just speaking with veterans, I'm speaking in general, is unless you've physically walked in the steps of that trauma that that person went through, you're not going to understand the mental side of it. And the reason is because you can't see it. It's not a broken arm. You just see somebody that's upset. Maybe you know why, maybe you don't. But after a period of time of talking to them, people get to that point where they just say, well, you should just be getting over it. And I've even heard therapists tell people, well, you should be better by now. And if you can't see it and you don't understand it. So I decided to take the metaphor that is in the runs through the veteran community as he lost his battle to his demons or he's fighting his demons. I wanted to turn that into a way that people could see it. And so the demons themselves are just a metaphor, but it shows as you go through the book, it shows how um the battlefield has disrupted the veterans community. The increase in veteran homelessness and mental health issues and suicides and homicides and all of these things, drug abuse and alcohol abuse and all these things that run rampant through us. Each of those is a shadowy figure that affects us. It feeds off of our guilt. It feeds off of our fear. It fears off anger. It feeds off everything. And I wanted to put this in a way that somebody who's never experienced trauma could understand it. And when you see homeless veterans who are drug addicts, who are alcoholics, who are isolated and are not trustworthy or believed in the society, people can now start to relate about how you can, if you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not there. And so just because this is not a physical demon in real life, in the book, I made them a metaphoric type demon that people could relate to because now they could see what it was feeding off of. They could see what traumas is going through and the steps to even to recovery that it takes, you know, by facing your guilts and your problems and making amends for the things that you've done wrong. All of those are steps in the healing process and you can't skip them. And those are the hardest parts.
Exactly, exactly true. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think such a profound way to approach it because whether people believe in the literal demons or not, anyone's who's carried the trauma knows exactly like what it feels like when the ghost won't leave. So,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And like uh this might sound contradictory, but actually not. Like some people say, like constantly revisiting trauma through writing, speaking, or podcasting can reopen the wounds instead of healing them. So, what do you say to that?
You know, a lot of people that
Mm,
need help, the first thing I tell them to do is to sit down and document their story somehow. If you can't speak it, write it. Doesn't mean you have to publish it. It doesn't even mean that you have to share it with anybody.
mm,
But that focus of taking feelings and putting them in words
mm,
on paper makes you take a step back and examine yourself from a third person. And the book Echoes of War, that's exactly what happened to me. And I would get into sections of it and things would get tough and I would put it down. But
mm,
something always drove me to wanting to get back to it. And that's exactly um, why I would keep getting picked back up. Um, by that point, I had a drive to tell my story and
mm,
make amends with some of the things that I did wrong. For example, with my son, uh, explain why I changed and why I became this new person that, you know, me and my wife's been together since seventh grade. Been married for 30 years. And she knows how I used to be and
mm.
what I became. And so
Yeah,
I felt like that putting that down in paper got me past that stigma that I can't share it. And once you can share it, then you can speak it. And the more times you speak it, the easier the stories get. You know, you go
mm,
from crying to eventually being able to get through the story without crying. Doesn't mean you don't feel sad or you don't still have feelings, but you can control them and evaluate how you're feeling and put a expectation on it and put a reasonable belief of um, how you've came and the progress that you have made. It also allows you to evaluate the things that you need to make amends with. You know,
exactly.
um, people do things all the time, if whether it be drug abuse or alcohol abuse, through depression. And yes, it's an illness. It's a controlling illness that is hard to get out of. But that doesn't mean that you don't take you can't take responsibility for, your actions,
Mm.
and you should always go back and make those amends and close those gaps so you can move on from them. Otherwise, they're just gonna stick around.
I agree. I totally agree with this. Definitely. Great. I really appreciate that because it gets to the paradox. And I mean, silence can suffocate, but words can also sting. So, the way you balance that is a lesson for anyone who is carrying invisible scars. So, Donald, thank you so much for opening your heart and your history with such honesty. Like from the battlefield to the inner war, from the depths of despair to building platforms of hope, your story is a living reminder that pain can become the purpose. So, for all the listeners, if today's conversation has moved you, I encourage all of you to pick up Donald's book, Echoes of War, and look out for his next release as well, When Demons Followed Me Home. So, tune into the Spirits and Stories or uh, Veteran Voice Radio, because somewhere in those voices, you might hear your own reflection or the hope that you have been waiting for. So, Donald, like if someone wants to connect with you, what will be the great medium?
So they can find me at donalddunn.me.
Mhm.
They can find me on Facebook at Donald Dunn or Veteran Voice Radio or even my company, Barracks Media. All those are on Facebook and Instagram, and you can follow me there.
Perfect, perfect. So, what I'll do is I'll put all the links into the show notes for your easy reference, dear listeners. And with this hope, this is your host, Avik, reminding you to live with compassion, listen deeply, and keep building a healthy mind and a healthy life. So, thank you so much.